You know, when you are flipping through crates at a record store or scrolling through a streaming app on your phone,
Right.
and you just stop on a piece of legendary pop culture, say, one of the most famous album covers of the 20th century, it is so easy to assume it was born out of some grand, predestined master plan.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely project our modern reverence backward.
Yeah, exactly. You picture a boardroom full of executives, unlimited budgets, a massive crew, and this, like, crystal clear vision of the future being executed perfectly.
Which is funny because we like to think brilliance announces itself with a trumpet fanfare, when the reality of how art gets made is usually far less glamorous. It is often much quieter, more precarious, and, well, deeply human.
And that is exactly what we are digging into today. So welcome to this deep dive. We are exploring a fascinating stack of sources for you, ranging from exclusive interviews and gallery profiles to book publishing bios and even translated YouTube transcripts.
It's a really great mix of material.
It really is. And they all center around a photographer named Vernon Dewhurst. Our mission today is to uncover the serendipitous, surprisingly normal, and highly technical origins of one of the most iconic images of the 1960s. I'm talking about the 1969 album cover for David Bowie's Space Oddity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are really exploring today is the fleeting nature of creative moments. We are going to look at the severe discipline required in early analog photography and the wild, almost unbelievable reality of losing your own historic, world-famous work for half a century.
It's crazy. Okay, let's unpack this by looking at how these two paths even crossed in the first place. To understand that Space Oddity cover, you have to understand Vernon Dewhurst.
Right.
Born around 1943, he grew up in England and ended up graduating in 1966 from the Regent Street Polytechnic School of Photography.
Which, by the way, was a remarkably culturally vibrant place to be in swinging London.
Oh, yeah.
To give you an idea of the energy there, the student union at that very school hosted the first UK performance by Jimi Hendrix.
Wow.
Yeah. It was literally an epicenter of the 1960s youthquake.
So Vernon is soaking all of that in. He graduates, spends an interesting year over in Dublin, and then heads back to London to work at Studio 5 in Mayfair.
Just, cutting his teeth, shooting fashion and beauty.
Right, doing the daily grind.
Oh.
But his professional trajectory is entirely upended by his living situation. It is 1967 or 1968, and Vernon is renting a room in a shared 5-person house in Clareville Grove, South Kensington.
Sounds crowded.
It was. And living in the room right above him, on the top floor, is a young, completely unknown musician named David Bowie and his girlfriend Hermione.
It is the quintessential starving artist, shared house scenario, shared facilities, paper-thin walls, constantly bumping into each other in the hallway.
And they actually hit it off. Vernon finds David friendly, funny, obsessed with music, and deeply fascinated by the concept of fame.
Even back then.
Even back then. So Vernon would casually pop upstairs to David's room just to hang out. He would sit cross-legged on the floor with a glass of cheap wine and a smoke, while David played his big acoustic guitar, testing out whatever he had been writing that day.
Just a totally normal Tuesday night.
Exactly. And there is one specific detail from the sources that just blew my mind. One day, David gets his hands on this brand new mechanical little instrument called a stylophone. Have you ever seen one of these?
I have, yes. It is essentially a miniature analog synthesizer.
Right.
You play it by tapping a small metal stylus against a metal keyboard. It produces a very distinct synthetic buzzing tone.
Yeah. So David uses this little metal box to play an early version of a song he's working on, which happens to be Space Oddity.
Wow.
And Vernon, sitting right there on the bedroom floor, is deeply skeptical. He actually tells David that the sound is harsh and metallic, and he really doesn't think it works for the song at all.
That's hilarious.
I mean, to me, Vernon living downstairs from David Bowie is like having a bedroom right next to a tech startup's garage in the 90s. You are getting a front row seat to the messy, unpolished prototype of the future.
It is an interesting comparison, but I'd argue it's even more precarious than a tech startup.
How so?
Well, a startup usually has a business plan and, venture capital. Vernon and Bowie were just two guys in their early 20s trying to figure out how to pay rent.
That's a fair point.
And Vernon's reaction to the stylophone is a perfect example of how hard it is to recognize a masterpiece when it is still under construction.
But wait, he hears the foundational riff of Space Oddity on the instrument that literally defines the final track, and his instinct is that it sounds like a cheap toy. How does a professional artist miss that?
Because you really have to separate the raw prototype from the finished production.
Okay,
What sounds metallic, harsh, and grating in a small, acoustically dead bedroom environment is completely different from how that same sound functions inside a professional, multi-track studio soundscape.
Ah, right. The context changes everything.
Exactly. Think about the final mix of Space Oddity. Once that mechanical texture of the stylophone is layered with deep reverb, sweeping orchestral strings, and Bowie's isolated, echoing vocals,
Big magic.
it suddenly becomes the perfect futuristic anchor for a song about being utterly lost in the coldness of space. Vernon couldn't hear the final mix in that room. He could only hear a guy buzzing away on a strange new gadget.
That makes a lot of sense.
It really emphasizes why the journey from a bedroom prototype to a finished studio production is so vital.
But, his belief in Bowie was completely cemented shortly after that anyway.
Mhm.
Vernon goes to see David perform at his arts lab in Beckenham.
Right, the famous arts lab.
Yeah, and Vernon hears the term arts lab and naturally expects something glamorous, maybe a chic gallery space. Instead, he walks into a dingy, smoke-filled back room of a pub in South London.
Not exactly the Royal Albert Hall.
No, it is a long, long way from fame and fortune.
But the physical environment basically evaporated the moment Bowie took the stage. Vernon notes in the sources that seeing Bowie's genuine rapport with the audience, his natural friendliness, his commanding voice, and his sheer stage presence, it completely transformed those drab surroundings.
It's like he projected stardom.
Exactly. It didn't matter that they were in the back of a pub. That was the specific moment Vernon was convinced this guy was destined for absolute greatness.
So Vernon has this revelation in a dingy pub that his upstairs neighbor is a star. But there's a massive leap between believing in someone's talent and being tasked with capturing their visual essence for a major record label.
A huge leap.
We are now in 1969, Bowie's second album is ready, and it desperately needs a cover. Here's where it gets really interesting. How did Vernon actually get the job?
This is where we see the fascinating intersection of high-concept artistic vision and the extremely rigid technical limitations of the era.
Okay.
The concept for the shoot was a three-way collaboration between David, Vernon, and a man named Calvin Mark Lee. Calvin was the A&R man for Mercury Records, and crucially, he was a major collector of prints by Victor Vizcarelli.
Vizcarelli was a massive figure in the op art movement, right?
Yes. Op art, or optical art, uses geometric patterns, stark contrasts, and optical illusions to create images that look like they are vibrating, warping, or moving.
Which fits the era perfectly.
Completely. In 1969, against the backdrop of the Apollo moon landing, op art was hugely in vogue. It carried all these cultural connotations of multidimensions, deep space, and bleeding-edge technology.
And Calvin just happened to have these prints.
Yeah, Calvin had about a dozen of these Vizcarelli prints hanging in his office just off High Street, Kensington. It was the absolute perfect aesthetic match for the cosmic isolation of Space Oddity.
So they decide to use one of Calvin's Vizcarelli prints as the background, and the shoot itself happens at Vernon's studio on St. Michael's Street in Paddington.
A very specific setup.
Yeah, the physical environment of this shoot is so meticulously specific. It is an entirely black room. Black floor, black ceiling, black walls.
Which is an essential detail for what they were trying to accomplish technically.
Why is that?
Well, when you were shooting highly complex portraiture on film, any reflective surface in the room will bounce light and ruin your exposure. A completely black room gave Vernon absolute pinpoint control over his lighting setup.
Ah, got it. So he has some quiet music playing in the background to set the mood. And who is in the room? Just 4 people. Vernon, David, Calvin Mark Lee, and Vernon's Chinese assistant, Zin. That is it.
Super intimate.
Very. David is standing in the center, totally natural, wearing absolutely no makeup, which really stands out given what we know of Bowie's later, highly theatrical career.
Right. No Ziggy dust yet.
Exactly. Calvin is to his left. Zin is next to Vernon. It is an incredibly relaxed, intimate setting, and the whole session is over in less than 2 hours.